All right, let's dive into something we literally walk all over every single day, but probably don't think much about. Soil.
Yeah, most people just think it's dirt.
Exactly. But it's a whole lot more than that. In this deep dive, we're going to get into the fascinating world of soil microbiology.
Specifically, Chapter 2 of this handbook on soil health.
We'll be looking at the life teeming below the surface and, more importantly, how we can tell if our soil is healthy.
It's more complex than most people realize.
I'll admit, I've taken soil for granted for, well, my entire life. I'm just starting to understand that it's not just dirt, it's an entire ecosystem.
A complex one at that. This handbook really drives home how crucial microbes are to everything that goes on in the soil.
Yeah, that microbial life in soil section, that was a real eye-opener.
It's crazy to think, we walk around on this stuff all the time, but there's this invisible universe right under our feet.
And it's not just a couple of, bugs and worms down there.
No, not at all. The sheer abundance of microbes in healthy soil is incredible. We're talking billions of organisms in just a teaspoon.
Billions? Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What are all these microbes doing down there?
Well, the handbook says we can think of the soil as a city.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Each microbe has a job, contributing to the overall health and functioning of the ecosystem.
So who are some of the key players in this microbial metropolis?
Well, you've got bacteria, which are kind of like the construction workers.
Okay, I can see that.
They're busy breaking down organic matter, releasing nutrients, and even helping to build the soil structure.
Wow, so they really are building the city.
They are. And some bacteria even pull nitrogen from the air.
Like from the atmosphere.
Exactly. They convert it into a form plants can use. It's essential for growth.
So they're not just builders, they're like the farmers too.
You could say that. They're providing the essential building blocks.
And the handbook mentions fungi too, right?
Right. Fungi are crucial, especially a type called mycorrhizal fungi.
Try saying that 5 times fast. Mycorrhizal fungi.
These fungi form a symbiotic relationship with plant roots.
Symbiotic, so they're working together.
Exactly. They're like an underground network of pipelines.
Pipelines, what do you mean by that?
The mycorrhizal fungi extend the reach of the plant roots, helping them access water and nutrients from a much larger area of soil than they could on their own.
So the fungi are kind of like extending the plant's reach.
Yeah, it's like giving them extra long straws to sip up water and nutrients.
And they protect the plants from disease too.
They do. It's a win-win situation.
So it's not just about the microbes themselves, it's about how they interact with everything else in the soil.
Exactly. And the handbook points out that microbial activity changes depending on how deep you go into the soil.
Oh, interesting. So is it like layers of a cake with different things happening in each level?
That's a good way to think about it. The topsoil, that top layer, is where most of the action is.
I can see that. It's all crumbly and, I don't know, alive.
Right. It's teeming with life because it's rich in organic matter.
That makes sense. It's where most of the plant roots are too, right?
Exactly. As you move deeper into the subsoil, things quiet down a bit.
Like less activity.
Yeah. There's less organic matter, less oxygen, and fewer microbes.
And at the very bottom, the bedrock.
That's like the foundation of our city, and microbial activity is minimal there because there's not much organic matter to break down.
Okay, so we've got this bustling city beneath our feet, but the activity level depends on where you are in that city.
Right. You would have a busy downtown area in the topsoil, and then quieter suburbs in the subsoil.
I like that. What are some examples of how this plays out in the real world?
Well, the handbook compares an organic farm's topsoil to a rainforest teeming with life.
Okay, I can picture that, all those plants and animals and bugs.
Exactly. You've got tons of bacteria, fungi, and other microbes all interacting and contributing to a healthy, fertile soil.
But if you go deeper down into the subsoil, it's more like a slow-growing forest.
Right, with activity happening at a much slower pace.
So even within the same soil city, you can have very different neighborhoods.
Exactly, each with its own unique set of inhabitants.
And that's why understanding these variations in microbial activity is so important.
It helps us make better decisions about how we manage soil and what we plant where. And that brings us to another important point in the handbook, enhancing microbial diversity.
Okay, so we want a lot of different types of microbes.
Exactly. A diverse microbial community makes the soil healthier and more adaptable to changes.
Like a diverse city is more resilient, right?
That's a great analogy. Now, how do we actually encourage that diversity?
Yeah, it sounds a little, I don't know, abstract.
It's all about creating the right conditions for a variety of microbes to thrive.
So what, like building them tiny little houses?
Not quite. Think about it more like providing a diverse buffet.
A buffet for microbes?
Yeah, the handbook talks about things like crop rotation, where farmers plant different crops each year.
To keep things interesting.
Exactly. Each crop has unique demands on the soil, so it keeps the microbial community on its toes.
So it's like a varied diet for the soil.
You got it. And it helps prevent certain microbes from becoming too dominant.
Makes sense. What else can we do?
Reducing tillage is another big one.
Tillage, that's like plowing, right?
Yeah, plowing or tilling can disrupt those delicate microbial communities.
So we want to minimize soil disturbance.
Exactly. Let those microbial networks flourish undisturbed.
Less disruption, more diversity. Got it. Anything else?
The handbook also talks about cover crops, which are like a living blanket for the soil during the off-season.
Cover crops, so they're not actually harvested.
Right. They protect the soil from erosion, add organic matter, and suppress weeds.
And how does that tie back to microbial diversity?
They provide a habitat and food source for a wider range of microbes than a bare field would.
Gotcha. It's all about creating a welcoming environment.
Exactly. Now, this is all fascinating, but it sounds like a lot of work for, big farms.
Is there anything us regular folks can do in our own backyards?
Absolutely. Even small changes can make a difference.
Like what?
Composting, for example, is a fantastic way to boost microbial diversity.
Compost, that makes sense. It's basically decomposed organic matter.
Right. And it's like a gourmet buffet for your soil microbes.
So I'm feeding the microbes,
Yeah.
not necessarily the plants directly.
You're feeding both, actually. Healthy microbes mean healthy plants.
So it's like recycling, but for our gardens.
I like that. You're giving your kitchen scraps and yard waste a second life.
I can definitely get behind that. What about those mycorrhizal fungi we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah, those are great for plant growth. You can actually buy mycorrhizal inoculants.
Wait, you can buy fungi? What does that even look like?
It comes in a powder or granular form, basically beneficial fungi spores.
So you just sprinkle on the soil?
Yep. And it helps improve the soil's ability to absorb water and nutrients.
So it's like giving your plants a little extra boost.
Exactly. They get a helping hand from their fungal friends.
Teamwork makes the dream work. This whole conversation has me thinking about my garden in a whole new way. But how do we know if all our efforts are actually working? How can we tell if our soil is truly healthy?
That's where those soil health indicators come in.
From section 2.2 of the handbook.
You got it. It's like taking the soil's pulse.
So what are the key things we should be looking for?
Well, the handbook mentions several important indicators. Starting with soil structure, does the soil crumble easily, allowing for good air and water flow?
So crumbly good, dense bad.
Pretty much. Compacted soil can suffocate those microbes we've been talking about.
Okay, what else should we be checking for?
Organic matter content is another big one. Healthy soil is usually dark and rich with lots of decomposed material.
That's what feeds those microbes.
Exactly. Then there's pH level, which affects nutrient availability.
So we need to make sure it's not too acidic or too alkaline.
Right. Most plants prefer a slightly acidic to neutral soil, but some thrive in more alkaline conditions.
So it's all about finding the right balance.
And the handbook also stresses the importance of monitoring soil health at various depths, not just at the surface.
Why is that? I thought the topsoil was where most of the action is.
It is, but remember how microbial activity varies by depth.
Right, the bustling city versus the quiet suburbs.
Exactly. What's healthy at the surface might not be true further down.
Okay, so we need to check the whole soil profile, not just the top layer.
The handbook gives the example of a vegetable garden versus an orchard.
Okay, so different plants have different needs.
A shallow-rooted vegetable garden might only need its topsoil checked, while an orchard with deep roots needs monitoring at multiple depths.
To make sure those roots are getting what they need.
Precisely. It's like giving your soil a full-body checkup.
I like that analogy. But what if those checkups reveal some problems? How do we actually address those soil health challenges?
Well, that's where the handbook gets really practical. It talks about a range of strategies for improving soil health.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Not at all. There are lots of things we can do.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Adding organic amendments like compost or cover crops can really boost the soil's vitality.
Compost, it's the miracle cure, it seems.
It's pretty amazing stuff. It provides food for the microbes, improves soil structure, and helps retain moisture.
What about drainage issues? If the soil's too compacted?
The handbook mentions improving drainage if compaction is a problem.
So like breaking up the soil?
You could try that. Or adding sand to clay soil can help.
And in more extreme cases, installing French drains.
Right. It all depends on the severity of the problem.
And what about pH issues? If it's too acidic or too alkaline,
Soil testing can help you determine if your pH is off.
so you know what adjustments to make.
Exactly. If it's too acidic, adding lime can raise the pH. If it's too alkaline, adding sulfur can lower it.
It's like a chemistry experiment in the garden.
It can be, but it's all about working with the soil you have and making adjustments based on those soil health indicators.
I'm starting to feel like a soil detective.
That's the spirit. Understanding these concepts empowers you to make informed decisions about how to care for your soil and create a thriving ecosystem.
Okay, so we've talked about how to assess soil health and even how to make improvements. But I'm wondering how all this knowledge actually helps us choose the right plants for our gardens.
That's where this deep dive gets really practical. Once you understand what's going on beneath the surface, you can start matching plants to their ideal soil conditions.
So it's not just about picking plants that we think look pretty.
No, not at all. It's about picking plants that will actually thrive in the specific soil we have.
And the handbook mentions soil depth as being a crucial factor.
Right. Think of it like real estate location, location, location.
Okay, I like that. Some plants want a penthouse view, others are happy in the basement.
Exactly. Some plants prefer a bustling city center, while others need a more spacious suburb.
So how do we know which plants are which?
Well, let's start with shallow-rooted plants.
These are the ones that are happy in that topsoil layer, right?
Right. Their roots don't venture very deep, so they're content with what they can find in those upper layers.
So if I have a garden with rocky or compacted soil that doesn't allow for deep root growth, I should stick with shallow-rooted plants.
That's a smart strategy. You're working with what you've got.
So things like lettuce, strawberries, annual flowers.
Exactly. Those are all great choices for shallower soils.
What about plants with deeper roots?
Those are the ones that need more space to stretch out. They thrive in deeper soils where their roots can access water and nutrients further down.
Like trees and shrubs.
Yes. And even some perennials with extensive root systems.
And the handbook mentions these deep-rooted plants are great for erosion control.
Absolutely. Those roots act like anchors, holding the soil in place.
So choosing the right plants can actually help protect our soil.
It's nature's way of engineering stability.
And another factor to consider is the water table.
Right. Remember how we talked about how it fluctuates?
Yeah, sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low.
Well, some plants love having it close by.
They like having wet feet.
You could say that. But other plants need a bit more distance.
So if I have a garden with a high water table, are there certain plants I should avoid?
Definitely. A high water table can create waterlogged soil, which can deprive roots of oxygen.
So what are my options if my garden tends to be on the wetter side?
The handbook talks about a whole group of plants that are adapted to wet and waterlogged soils.
They can handle having soggy roots.
They actually thrive in those conditions. They've evolved strategies to cope with those oxygen-deprived conditions.
So if I have a soggy spot in my garden, I could actually turn it into a thriving wetland habitat.
Exactly. Embrace the swamp.
That's a new one for me. So plants like willows, alders, certain types of irises.
Those are all great choices for wet areas.
This is really changing the way I think about garden design.
It's all about working with nature, not against it.
And on the other end of the spectrum, we have those plants that prefer a much drier environment.
Right. They thrive in areas with a low water table where the soil drains well.
So if I live in a dry climate or have sandy soil, these are the plants for me.
Exactly. Think of things like cacti, succulents, lavender, rosemary.
They're the desert dwellers of the plant world.
They are adapted to survive with minimal water.
This has been so fascinating. It's like a whole new world opens up when you understand your soil.
And the needs of different plants.
It's about making informed choices, both for the health of our plants and the long-term health of the soil.
Exactly. We can all be stewards of this incredible ecosystem.
Well, I think our listeners are ready to get out there and start exploring.
I hope so. Remember, even small changes can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Every little bit helps.
Whether it's adding compost to your potted plants or choosing native plants for your garden.
We can all have a positive impact on this amazing world beneath our feet. And that's a wrap for this deep dive into the fascinating world of soil.
Thanks for joining us.
We hope you've learned something new and are inspired to, well, dig a little deeper into the wonders beneath your feet. Until next time, happy gardening.